it's actually not my job to just like constantly be opining on things. It's my job to like approach large scale problems thoughtfully and then communicate thoughtfully. And that means sometimes like not saying anything. In fact, most of the time it means like listening and not talking. When I see just anyone who's like supposed to be a political leader and they're just like saying a lot, I'm like, okay, but how much problem solving are you doing? Like, it starts to make me feel a little bit weird. I feel like I live a different internet life now. I guess that's the best way I could put it, because I have to. And I really want, like, there will be a day after politics for me where like I just get absolutely buck wild and I will announce my retirement from being a role model. And it's just not anytime soon, and I'm sorry.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
How are you? And answer honestly.
So I do feel better today and right now. You may have seen it's been kind of just a devastating last 48 hours at the city anyway. We had a very tragic incident where a young person was shot outside Jimmy Lee Rec Center. Come to find out the shooter is an employee who works at the rec center, and just like people trying to wrap our heads around, how did this come to happen? Like, how could this be possible? I feel really, really encouraged and just so relieved that the victim is actually okay. Like not okay, but like he survived. And so we avoided at least like a terrible loss of life, but just felt like all of yesterday, all of the night before that it just became like kind of upended and consumed by like trying to figure out how to support the community. And, Jimmy Lee Rec Center is right next to Central High School, serving, so many people in Rondo neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods. Actually serves a handful of my constituents who live in like Midway, kind of up Snelling or up Lex Parkway. So that was really hard. That was honestly really painful. Sometimes working at the city, you are in the deep end of these like very painful breakdowns of all the different like systems and lack of resources or other issues that are like creating these very painful problems. And then you have to deal with it and figure out what can we do to make it be different. So that's kind of fresh in my mind, but also have gotten the chance to have really good conversations this week with people as part of my work at the city on all kinds of things and trying to kind of hold all of it at once. So
I'm going to officially introduce the podcast.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. I don't usually have a pre-written introduction, but this is the Wedge Live podcast. And as you may have heard, 2023 is an unusual year in that there will be city council elections in both Minneapolis and St. Paul. So today, our broadcast signal is crossing the river. I'm your host, John Edwards, in Minneapolis, and my guest is Mitra Jalali, who is running for re-election to the St. Paul City Council. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Actually, I think this is the first time I've ever been on your podcast also.
It definitely is. There's no thinking about it. Definitely is the first time.
So that's exciting for me personally. Just commemorate that.
You have a little bit of history doing podcasts, right? I feel like when I edit the episodes, I host and I edit. And when I watch myself, I feel like such low energy this guy has, which I don't feel in the moment, but I don't know if I'm bringing enough energy for people. So I'm hoping you can react to me in a way that compensates for my lack of energy.
Do you not pop on camera? Have you gotten audience feedback? Like, what's the feedback?
I haven't gotten audience feedback on my personality so much. Generally good feedback about the podcast and the people I talk to. That's but good. when I edit and I watch myself, I'm like, wow, am I about to fall asleep? I feel like I drag. Maybe I go on too long. I don't know. These episodes go on a while.
I've always had you come across as just like very clear and focused. So I think that's good. I used to have a podcast. I used to have a whole podcast about ABC's Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So if you care about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I'll probably talk to you about that on another podcast. But yeah,
I don't think I could speak intelligently about Marvel.
Well, there's a lot of people who can't speak intelligently about Marvel, but that hasn't really stopped them. So don't count yourself out.
Okay. So let's start with the theme for 2023 elections. 2021, I can think very clearly what the theme for that election was. I don't know what should we be talking about candidates in Minneapolis and St. Paul? What's the issue? Is there a clear theme, or are we just going to talk about a bunch of different stuff?
So what I think this is an interesting question. I haven't really been asked it yet, so I'm going to give you like my rough answer. In St. Paul, what we're looking at is a reality we know now, which is a majority of our council's not returning. So, I've been grateful to serve alongside, 6 other colleagues, and 4 of them have announced now that they're retiring and they're not running for re-election. So that means that I think we'll be seeing like a whole new slate of leaders coming forward, wanting to build on the progress we've made, keep pushing the envelope, go even further. And so I think the theme in St. Paul is just change. And whether it'll be change for the better or, change for the status quo or kind of taking us back, like that's to voters to decide and for candidates and campaigns to run for. But I feel optimistic about it. I personally feel excited. I'll be honest, I feel a little scared. Like that's a lot of change all at once, but I'm also with that, this is so weird to say because it still doesn't feel true, but I am the second most senior council member now.
Wow.
At least when all the transitions happen, like with who is left, I will be like the second most senior council member. And
well, due to a quirk of history, it will be your third election, right?
Yes. Yes, because I ran in 2018 in a special election, again in 2019, and I am running again in 2023 right now. So yeah, I have been running for office a lot. I've run for the city council in St. Paul a lot, John. Like a lot.
Is there a risk of low turnout, of just people not knowing it's happening? I feel election burnout here in Minneapolis. We've had a bunch in a row. We just had one. Yep. Now we're having one again. It feels like what happened to you is happening to every council member in Minneapolis now. Yep. They have to immediately run for re-election. Will voters turn out?
Yeah, I'm very interested. I think I was kind of asking myself that question in 2021 because it was like the year after the presidential election, and there were like, there were up ballot races and things, but I think it's just kind of the notorious like drop off year. And I think in St. Paul we had record voter turnout for rent stabilization, for Mayor Carter, because that was, the other thing about us is our mayor and our council are staggered years. I think in Minneapolis it's like the Super Bowl. It's like everyone runs.
Everyone except for 23, where the mayor and the park board will not be on the ballot.
Yep. So I think having just come off recent experiences where I thought there would be low turnout years. Like, actually, I can say this definitively. Every year that I have run for city council, and I don't know what's going on, it's just kind of what's happening. But 2018, 2019, and then a recent year that I observed, 2021, were all like progressively like notable turnout years as compared to relative years. Like record turnout for organized trash in St. Paul. That's like a real sentence that is a fact. Historic high turnout for, the 2021 city election. My 2018 election was like on the gubernatorial primary date. So there was like record primary turnout in Minnesota. And that happened to be like the year that I was running. So I ran and was like on the August primary, just people were voting in my election. And that was like a record election year of turnout. So people just keep on voting, John.
Yeah.
It's like,
can't stop them.
You can't. And like, I think that's good because you just see so much like discouraging stuff happening. I mean, there hasn't been like a chill year since, I don't know, 2014. Maybe that's just like my bias talking, but I don't feel like there has been a chill year since kind of around that time.
Yeah.
And it's like season 9 of America now. I don't know.
So
It's just like it keeps getting more stressful.
one
But
of the
people
things
don't give up. They keep voting.
one of the things I worry about is like the attention, the negative attention that we used to put onto national politics, national political figures, has kind of shifted to local elected leaders. And so I worry that maybe the quality of person who was willing to like wreck their life by running for city council, which used to be like a sleepy job. No one knew who their council member is. Now you're a demon because you're the person who has caused crime to skyrocket. You've defunded the police when you really didn't. There's lots of negative attention, lots of social media attention. And I used to think like social media is a good thing for like getting people aware of local politics, getting people interested. And I feel like there's a lot of like negative interest in local politics now. And I wonder if is social media a bad thing? I mean, obviously it's good and bad, but I feel like we've taken a turn.
I definitely, I've observed that there's a like documented national trend of local elected officials burning out and like local leaders burning out. So in addition to actual elected folks, it's also like people who like are the heads of departments or who have major kind of bureaucratic leadership roles that are really about like executing the work of the city in many ways. And that's because of just all of the things that happened in 2020 and in 2021 with like historic international and national civil unrest that like generated from what happened here in our communities, and all of the pandemic burnout, and the fact that for a lot of the pandemic we didn't actually have help from the federal government. Like we didn't, which is so wild to think about. Like we don't, it's like since that started to shift, it's like gotten on an upward trajectory, but there was a lot of that. We were just like, it was us. Like the local government was the front line and no one else was, hardly anyone was doing anything. And cities and counties were just like, I guess we're going to reorganize the way we do our libraries now. I guess we're going to make sure that, kids, like I remember SPPS just doing meal service for kids, like with a mobile truck going around, making sure kids could just eat because school was interrupted, and that's where kids depend on getting their lunch. So school board, all of these different like pandemic policies, and then post, or, I hate saying post pandemic, but, all these kind of new stage pandemic policies. You have just a lot of anger from people. They're just so frustrated, and we are someone they can come and scream at about that. So, I've definitely felt that. I think I have a certain admiration for people who are choosing to run like in these conditions, because it can say something very notable about their commitment. And it's just a lot.
So run for office, everyone. It's a lot.
Run for office. It's a lot.
The original question I had planned was, can you sell people on running for office? I don't know if we sold people on the idea of running for office, but that's okay.
Well, I don't know if
office.
if I can be a little, I don't know if it's politically incorrect or what. Like, I don't want to sell most people on running for office. Like, I think this job is really hard. I don't think that most people should do it unless they're very serious about like what responsibility it requires, unless they have a clear, impact analysis of like, this is what I want to do to help my community through this level of office. And like, I think our political culture is very, what am I trying to say here? Like, I think a lot of people run for office because they want to like be the guy, like they want to be in all the pictures. They want to be like, they want to have a microphone. And like the truth about power is that it comes with a lot of responsibility. And if you can't talk about like what you're willing to do with it and how to be accountable, I don't actually want you running for office. So I hope that we sell some people out of running for office and some others maybe being convinced that like, actually, no, you would be a good voice for our community right now. But
yeah, a lot of people want the title, or they want to climb the ladder, and they don't have an issue set that they believe in. Like, even if I disagree with you, I can respect that, like, you're running for office you have things you want to do, and you aren't just looking to add another line to the resume.
Yes. Or, maybe it's more just a misunderstanding of what actually is within the purview of that like office or level of government. And you know, I spend a lot of time talking to people now who want to run for office because I am someone that can now answer those type of questions from a firsthand experience. And I spend a lot of time asking them questions like, what do you want to do with this office? From a totally open place, right? Like, tell me about, you know, what are you passionate about? What do you see happening in the community? How do you want to address it? And then, like, you will only be able to do these things, and you can for sure do these things. Like, what's your vision for using that power on behalf of the community? And it's important to ask those questions. And sometimes people are just already in and the whole shebang is going. And it's like, let's just make sure people know what their vision for impact is. So we don't have to belabor this point. I've been thinking about it a fair amount, actually. So it is, I made a conscious choice to run for re-election, I guess I'll say. And
does that mean it was hard?
It was hard. It actually, you know, it was something that I intellectually felt I was probably going to do, but emotionally had really been through a lot. I think that in the time I've been a councilwoman, our community has really shifted, or just the urgency behind the reasons why I ran have like exponentially intensified. And like I experience the, you know, I experience the pushback. I experience the inside grind. Like I am in all of it. And especially if you're like a younger person, if you don't have, you know, if you experience misogyny, if you don't have white privilege and people just feel like they can talk to you any kind of way or like have different standards for you they would never have for like a white man elected, all of that's part of it, right? So it was more that I needed to like really take the time to heal and process and refocus myself to say, like, our community deserves someone who's all in, and I am making sure that I'm all in. And I did. I got to that place. So I'm here, I'm all in, and I'm on the podcast.
You know how I can tell you're all in?
How?
And this is going to be a compliment before we get to like the gotcha questions.
Okay, good. Yes, let's do all of it.
The most informative and well done candidate website I've ever been to. I think maybe.
Amazing.
I think
amazing.
You didn't just have someone else do this. It seems like you probably put a lot of effort into this.
Thank
right?
you. I did. We did. Our whole team did. Because here's the thing. We've done
Can I finish my compliments though?
Yes,
I feel like I had so much more to say about this.
I'm sorry. I thought that was it.
Well, I pause, and it's hard for people to tell when I'm done talking, and it's very bad for a remote podcast like this, but very specific and clear. Like there aren't cliches where it's like, where does she even stand? Lisa Goodman could have said these things. Is this Mitra or is this Lisa? There's no difficulty understanding how you would act when you're in office. You're very specific and like not afraid to take positions on things that maybe a lot of people in your ward won't like, but you're very clear and you explain. If you want more detail, you click through and you find that more detail, or you can not click through and just leave it at the high level stuff. So I think that's, like you mentioned, the land value tax and the vacant building tax. You could probably talk about those things. Somebody didn't just put that on your website. Parking minimums. You're gonna brag about eliminating parking minimums on your website. What's wrong with you? So I love the website. I think it's a model that other candidates can look at, and they will people hearing this will probably steal your website from you and delete all the controversial things. That's what I think. Well,
thank you for the very kind words. We spent so much time on it, and you know, it's a few things for me. It's that I think communicating our work is so important. I think it shows like what a leader values, who they care about, knowing what, you know, it's like, hey, I want to continually let you know what I'm working on. Like that to me is a form of like care and responsibility. I think it's about, you know, framing city issues in a way that's very human-centered and important so that more people can participate in city politics. I think that especially like land use and housing issues, as you know, can feel very complicated and unfriendly to the average person. Like we're all experiencing the housing market and transportation systems, but like the language of urban planning feels very not intuitive or just kind of headachy to like the average person. I care a lot about like demystifying here's how the city works. And then, we haven't just been doing nothing for 4 years. Like our office works all the time, like multiple teams of people over the years that have just like given so much to help our constituents. And like, I just care about showing that work. So thank you. Thank you for the kind words. MitraJalali.com. Enjoy. Feedback.
Because city council candidates, there's not going to be a lot of stories written about them necessarily in their positions, at least. They'll interview when something big happens, but do I really know what that council member thinks about the whole spectrum of issues based on that story? Very little issue coverage in local and city politics. And so websites are very important.
The Pioneer Press, right? In the time that I've been a council member has like been bought by a hedge fund and is just getting bled out. Like it's also like the capacity for local journalism is at maybe historic lows, and the reporters that are showing up and giving attention to it, like there's just not big enough teams of support around them to actually digest like what's the history behind this issue? What was that conversation at the council table today like really about? What was between the lines? What are the backdoor politics? Like what's some community reaction? All of that it's hard to really cover local government. It actually is challenging, especially when you don't have, that much support and resource. And I think that's also an important thing to note and what would make democracy better. And part of why I and many people love Wedge Live and we love hyperlocal coverage and all that stuff. But yeah, and then the last thing I'll say about this is like, to your point about the doublespeak and the platitudes, have you seen the episode of Parks and Rec where Paul Rudd is like debating Leslie Knope and the Paul Rudd guy, the like Sweetums corporate like heir?
I guess I want to do a good job because I like it when people think I do a good job. And I want your vote because I want Pawnee and my dad to see what I'm made of.
And he's just like, I'm against crime and I'm not afraid to say it.
I'm against crime and I'm not ashamed to admit it.
And I really feel like that genre of declarative statement is pervasive in local politics, and like we should have big, broad, values type of communication. But okay, now it's time to ask you like 10 follow-up questions, right? Because you could be saying one thing and meaning completely something else.
Yeah, that's something I struggle with when I talk to candidates, which is the worst thing in the world because a lot of them just don't say anything. It's like, what is the question? I don't want to be confrontational because that's like, I'm not going to argue with people on the podcast. That's not productive. What can I ask them that will illustrate, their true selves and what they plan to do while in office that will help people understand the differences between candidates? Because it's so hard to tell sometimes if you're not paying very close attention and know the little secret cues and phrases people will say to tip you off. That's not really a question, but if you want to jump in.
I think a question I've had to answer that has made me sharper as a candidate is, what are some things you think the city could do to address that? And then you just have to actually give like solutions within the city's control, and it illuminates like, have you put some thought into how the city's currently addressing it or how they could be? And I want to be clear, like when I ran for city council, for better or worse, there's a lot I did not understand about the office. I think I understood like the basic high level. There was so much that I did not understand. And I think that it can turn into a little bit of like elitism or gatekeeping if we're not careful of like trying to grill people who maybe aren't deep in local government about like their vision for local government. But there should be, some basic effort put in by the candidate to articulate,
right,
like, here's what the city's general role is. Here's how I'd like to, take that up or expand it.
I understand what the job is, and these are my values, like proving those things.
These are my values, yes. So, yeah, all important stuff to think about when people are trying to earn your vote.
Have you had to take any votes, any positions on issues over your 5 years in office?
Yeah, it will be 5 by the end of this year. So I'm on my 4th now. Or I'm serving my 5th now, I guess.
Have you had to take any votes or positions where you disappointed your friends?
I definitely think I have. I think there were like a few really messy housing votes that just didn't feel good. Like either direction didn't feel good. Like I can think of there's a project at Lexington and Lexington Parkway and University, where a developer wanted to like buy the Wilder Foundation empty lot and like build affordable and market rate housing, but the community, which is like Frogtown, Rondo, lots of like historically BIPOC and disinvested in residents and neighborhoods, were really frustrated that they didn't feel like there was a genuine conversation with the developer about like a community-based vision for that site. I think they felt additional frustration that Wilder Foundation, which is like a community foundation, was making what felt like exclusively a business decision to just like sell the lot, have someone develop. Like it was just, I think they expected more from like the lot owner in that situation about how to like set a vision together with the community for what they wanted built there. There's like all these layers in the development process that I think exposed for me. There's rules the city sets for development that lay out the parameters, and like that should be clear and it should not have needless barriers, and like that is important for cities to take on as reform, zoning and variance rules and process, all that. That's not actually like enough to get, good community development built in every situation. It's like we have to set a baseline, but that's not necessarily a standard. Does that make sense? And I think that was like an example where, enough people on the council and enough people in the community felt like this needed to be like managed better from the outset to get the product to the finish line. And then the argument coming from the other side was, well, it's 60% AMI and it's off transit and it's multifamily and like, this was hard enough to develop as it is, and let's just get it done. And I just felt like I've kind of been following this. It's not in my ward. That project was not in my ward. It was in Ward 1. And like, if you're the council member for that ward, your role is to like shepherd those development projects along and do that engagement work and like get those people in the conversation together. And I have done that with dozens and dozens of projects in my ward. So to see it like happening a neighborhood over and feel like those steps were not done well enough is like very frustrating. And it didn't feel good. I felt like either way I voted, there was some value that I held that was just like not going to be upheld, and I just did not like it. It was a good example of like, just no one happy, everyone mad in any direction. So it like if I had voted one way, I would have infuriated one group of people, and if I voted another, I would have infuriated another, and like that just didn't, I don't look back on that vote as one I particularly enjoy.
Is that the one where the mayor vetoed the council action?
Yes.
And it did get approved?
So then the mayor vetoed the council veto, and then the development has since like had kind of a lurching forward on and off process in general, and has had. So
it hasn't broken ground?
I don't believe it has broken ground. I actually am not aware of the latest on it. It is, like I said, it's in a neighboring ward over, and so I've tried to stay abreast of what's been going on with it. But
I remember going to a political convention, or maybe it was a caucus, where I went by that parking lot before I think it was the subject of development. Large snow pile. It's like across from a drive-through and a very large snow pile next to a parking garage. I have vivid memories. Yep.
Well, and that's just it, right? Is like, I think that it could have been like a more multi-use, multi-purpose, more creative financing. Like there's a lot more pieces that could have gone into that. And like the developer never reached out to our planning department to try to explore that. One could argue they don't have to. One could also argue like, hey, if you want to do business in our community, you should like have a community mindset, which means just checking the box for your business decision isn't actually necessarily like good enough. And it's like good enough by your industry standards. It's not good enough by community standards where our people actually live here. There was also like, honestly and frankly, dynamics with that of people feeling like, do these developers like understand our community, or are they just like in corporate offices in the suburbs or with like, offices around the country, and they're just kind of here, getting their bottom, like it's all getting their bottom line. It's all that emotion. Like one member of the planning commission said, in all of the renderings of this project, nobody in the pictures even looked like, there were no people of color in any of the like visualizations of what they were showing us. Like, you can't build a project at Lexington Parkway and I keep saying Lexington and Snelling, which makes no sense. There are two roads that are parallel to each other. My brain is tired. You can't, it's like at Lexington University and you're just like, what are you, it's just, these are like details these are like cultural competency details that I think like don't get, it's like somehow in this industry and in society, like you make mistakes like that and they're considered like acceptable. And I feel like that's one of the ways that the like inequities in the housing market kind of shows up in like the processes. And so that's like a really superficial example, but like I say it because it exposed like how I watched the community experience that project and feel really frustrated and like they were just not involved. And oh, by the way, John, there were totally like entire other cadres of constituents who are like just honestly like stably housed white people who don't want multifamily development near them. And like we don't want to give that room either, but then what? We don't listen to, impacted residents who have like a whole different lens on it. I'm sorry, that's the end of my sentence. I'm just trying to give you a sense of the range of the mess. The mess.
Yeah, I went to a neighborhood meeting on that, I think, and the diversity of opinion from every direction, and this goes for any development project in a diverse place, lots of kinds of opinions, and sometimes the same kinds of people have lots of kinds of opinions. So
yeah, it was a lot, John. And here's the thing. I think the role of a council member in that situation, a year and a half before that vote comes up, is to shepherd that project and get everyone repeatedly around the same table to like agree on goals within the parameters, like have conversations that pull in different financing options, get the planning department like engaged, right? That's actually what a council member's job is, in my view. And so if you're just kind of like seeding the ground, you're going to get whatever is like kind of coming down the conveyor belt of the status quo. And we know that has left many people in our communities dissatisfied who are like overwhelmingly like poorer people of color. And like, we just got to do better. So I hope this is like, I hope this is helping you. I'm trying to give you kind of like an honest reflection of a thorny situation that I look back on where I don't love everything about it. And I wish that I wish a lot of things about it had been different. I don't want it to be like an empty lot. Right. I also want, I want like a good mix of development in the city that takes into account like community needs. And there's a lot of things that go into that, as you know. So that's one reflection I have of, I'm trying to think of other things I did that really made people mad. I know that maybe people just don't tell me they're mad. I was trying to think of like, if I've made my friends mad and I haven't, like, maybe my friends don't tell me all the time when they're mad. So if you're listening to this and I did something that you didn't like, let's just talk about it, I guess. Yeah,
stand up to Mitra. Let's open up the phones. 877 Wedge Live. Call Mitra to tell.
Hold Mitra accountable.
How mad you are at her for the thing that you've been holding inside for many years now. So we've kind of talked about this already, but like what is the public safety question right now? We've got a national rise in crime, local rise in crime. Everything seems to be moving together. And you have one style of candidate who really emphasizes the police staffing issue in their rhetoric. And then you have another style of candidate who will emphasize the alternatives, but then it's often like, you have some candidates saying both things, and how do you know where they really stand? I wonder, what is the public safety question? Because if the conversation feels stale and reflexive, and I don't know if it's productive.
I think the question is like, how are we going to prevent violence from happening in our communities? And when you answer that question honestly, you find a lot of solutions that point toward, we need to like correct historic disinvestments that have meant that, right now, statistically, like lower income people of color are disproportionately experiencing crime in our communities. And they have had to do that, and they've had to bear that for decades. and they're also like disproportionately punished for and criminalized by our laws, right? And so there's this like just this like breaking point being created through policy choices. You know that we've gone through the pandemic, and that has led to serious disruptions to people's lives and financial affairs, and created more crimes of opportunity as people can't actually be, there hasn't been as much like everyday life from the proximity, and like the pandemic has meant these like extended periods of isolation, which have opened up like theft and, property crimes, things like that. In St. Paul, we have this thing where people are like ripping copper wire out of the streetlights. And so we are trying to address copper street light wire theft. Just as an example of like what is a thing that is being dealt with. The catalytic converters thing, right? Like that, I know multiple people who've had their catalytic converters stolen. So there's all these types of crimes. And if you ask like, how do we prevent these things from happening? You'll find that there are a lot of solutions that are not just like hiring more police to react to them, right? And so that's the question I'm interested in, is like, what are we doing to prevent these things from happening? I'm thinking about, like, I started this conversation talking to you about a gun violence incident that recently happened, but one that we recently had sort of an anniversary of, not like a happy one. So on West 7th, which is like business corridor down, like kind of out, at the edge of downtown, it's like right by Xcel Energy Center. It's by like, what's down there? Cosetas and like the Uptowner, or I think it's called the Downtowner, and then Burger Mo's, all those like restaurants down there. So there was a horrible shooting at the truck park, like a horrible freak shooting. I think it was like 3-4 in the morning. 2 guests in an altercation. They just start shooting. Okay, like one of those 0 to 60, people are in the bar, everything's normal, and all of a sudden it's not. And it was happening at a place where we had recently taken a council vote on like allocating American Rescue Plan funds for a range of purposes. And one subset of funds was going toward SPPD for a range of things, including like radios and overtime hours for more patrols at this particular location. And as someone who has like been pretty questioning and discerning about like why we're giving more federal funds to SPPD and where is the funding that goes into SPPD going, what are they doing with it? The answer given was, well, these are for like overtime patrols on West 7th and other key areas around the city. And so the exact block where this mass shooting happened was the exact place where we had passed funding to like actually, theoretically prevent such a thing from happening. So it's like, and here's the thing, SPPD responded and our emergency responders responded and they dealt with it, and like it was devastating, and our those are our city workers, they were there. But I just think of it as an example of, we are funding the police even as a preventative thing sometimes, and it's not working. Right. Or we give them the funds and they don't either don't do the patrols, or the work's not happening the way it's supposed to prevent it. So I think that this question continues to get litigated. I think that the problems that people of color in our community are experiencing are being exploited by like cynical interests who don't actually personally experience those things to justify like a public safety paradigm that makes them feel safe but does not guarantee the safety of our residents, and that's wrong. And in St. Paul, what we've tried to do is fund what we do want to see. We've created an Office of Neighborhood Safety. We have built out a grants program that's going to get $4 million of ARP funds to like actually scale up good community programs that are like meeting youth in crisis, taking care of folks that are coming out of prison and need like reentry so they don't like, fall back into like an old lifestyle. Supports for families who have immediately experienced gun violence and are like ripped apart by that. Trying to break the cycle of retaliatory gun violence, right? I think both Minneapolis and St. Paul have like a hospital, like bedside program where trained staff come and they do conversations with folks who've just like either committed or experienced gun violence or both. And they are in that moment having those conversations because that feels like the midnight of that person's life where someone who they really trust and feel is credible can speak to them and say, your life can go one way right now or another way. And we care about you. We don't want this to continue, and we don't want you to, like, we want you to stay here. We don't want anyone to die or lose their life over this beef or this issue or whatever. Like, that's a program that's getting funded, and it can turn people away from, like, a cycle of violence, right? And then in addition to that, in addition to these, like, special interventions, there's broad social infrastructure. There's housing, healthcare, jobs, wages, worker protections, parks, libraries, rec centers. You see what I mean? So the thing that I think our work is, if you want to push for this approach, we have to define it clearly. I think that that's a big challenge that we see in, like, the progressive movement, is, like, how are we defining community safety clearly? How are we making sure it's not being co-opted so that other people are like, yeah, community safety, like community policing, or community safety, like National Night Out, or I don't know, things that, like, are well debated actually as to whether that's what we meant. We have to define that clearly, and what the different, like, levels of interventions are. I could keep going. I think this is, like, one of the things I've spent the most time, like, pushing on the council for. And it was one of the reasons I chose to run again. It's like, we have this early stage system now. We have different responders that come from 911, not just police. We have these programs that are, like, helping youth and families and people in crisis who are, like, committing violence or about to. And cold, brutal reality is they get, like, a shred of the funding they need to actually really deeply and permanently change what people are experiencing. And it's time to fight for that and make it permanent.
My experience of this in Minneapolis is that the police funding debate, the police staffing debate, seems untethered from the actual budget reality. Like, the Star Tribune itself has documented year after year, MPD has had more money than they can spend. And, like, we're up at $200 million, and staffing is still way, might be at a staffing low. I have never seen the staffing line tick up, but I have seen the budget numbers tick up. And to this point, it seems unrelated to the policies of the people who are actually running. As much as they say, like, they bang the drum for more staffing, it's not happening, and it's not going to be where they say it needs to be anytime soon. And so in the interim, could you put some eggs in a different basket? Maybe. It just feels like the things you are saying are for politics and are not based on anything that's achievable in the near term, even if we all get behind your push for more staffing. So.
And it's, like, coming back to that question, right? Is it preventing violence? Is it preventing crimes? Like,
yeah, I see Minneapolis police officers in the background of security camera footage of shootings on the local news. I'm like, we have cops downtown. The shootings are happening anyway. They're right. You could see them. They're right behind it. It's still happening.
There's so many examples of that. Like, we shut down this gas station that was just becoming, like, a magnet for things, and the property owner was, like, arguably coordinating some of it. And so we'd been spending, like, years documenting what actually is going on at this property and making sure we're taking, like, a principled, thoughtful approach, right? Not just being like, well, it's all the property owner's fault, or, like, this is a problem property just because there's people of color there, right? Like, that type of thing actually for sure happens and is messed up. No, this was like, someone died in the parking lot of this gas station, right? Like, kids were getting, like, harassed by adults at this gas station. Like, there was, like, things happening. And SPPD Western District put a squad car parked outside of it. And the squad car pulled over a school board member who's a Black woman who lives in the neighborhood and was, like, on her way home. It's just like, so there's like, people that you could probably see exchanging, like, drugs and money, like, right here. And then you're going to pull over the school board member who's, like, driving through. Like, this is like the type of things that we just don't have time for this. Like, we can't afford it. We don't have time for it. We have to work smarter. We have to resource the things that are actually going to prevent, like, violence and breakdowns from happening. And we just have to keep fighting, even though people, like, there is opposition to that. And you have to expect that and just, like, stand in it and overcome it. So that's what I think. You know, I'm interested in how the conversation will play out this year. I fully expect to spend a lot of time talking about, like, what's actually going on in neighborhoods. How are we addressing it? Just taking it on in an honest way too, in a front and center way, not like, you know, sometimes I think these conversations can get into a theoretical space, and, like, people are experiencing things now. We need to be able to talk about that in a thoughtful way.
So I was reading some of your future goals if you get reelected, and it was about enacting I think it was the no-knock policy in ordinance, and it made me wonder, can St. Paul City Council actually pass ordinances related to police policy? Because in Minneapolis, that's a no-no.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Really?
You can.
Oh.
And so I don't really know what y'all are doing over there.
It's a bizarre system we have here.
I don't understand. It's like thoughts and prayers, John. Like, and I just, power to my Minneapolis colleagues running to like use their policymaking authority to hold police accountable and like standardize best practices and, all these things that need to happen. Yeah, and that conversation resurfaced because of a situation that connected both our communities, because the Minneapolis police killed Amir Locke and they were executing an SPPD warrant, and just all these pieces coming together in such a messed up way. And
yeah, we had a whole debate about government structure, and it feels like it was on the exact wrong topic. And here St. Paul is offsetting police policy through a democratic process. I don't know. I was actually shocked to read that. I'm like, wait, this isn't really even about the strong mayor system. It's just we have a stupid system and a dumb city charter. Okay, we can move on.
I'm very interested in how, you asked me about like how things will play out in St. Paul. The thing I am interested in Minneapolis is I think this government structure space is being contested right now. Like, it's not one thing, it's not another. It's like being contested, right? Because this like charter change or whatever was passed, and now people are like figuring out this new system. And I think that council candidates have an opportunity to like just aggressively state, this is what the city period should be doing, where that authority or responsibility now lies with the administration. Here's what I'm going to do to hold the administration accountable to that. Also, as a council member, I can join with my colleagues around ideas that we could pass and fund, and like, here's what I want to do for that. And I think it's like a chance to convey vision, if that makes sense, in a time where the structure feels like it's TBD.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think the average resident wants to hear about, I don't know, I feel like I'm doing hot takes on your community, so I don't mean to be out of lane. It's like, I think that a lot of the like, here's how the structure is and why it is and etc. Like, it does need to get explained for sake of transparency, but then to spend all the time talking about that means you lose the conversation around like, what should we be doing for the community? And like, that is what I think is important to stay grounded in, is just, here's what should be done for the community. That's a conversation that puts the administration in an accountability place, puts council candidates in a like proactive solutions place. And then, yeah, you are going to get up in that government structure and you're going to battle every single day. You're going to like hurt people's feelings and be considered rude and like the problem woman of color. And like, thank God for that. So that's my personal editorial comment. But nobody asked me, so I'm sorry, Minneapolis.
Here's a question that's kind of like public safety and transportation and like, I don't know, the state of our society all wrapped in one. The Little Mekong night market, one of my favorite events, maybe my favorite event in St. Paul, was not held. Has it been how many years since it was held?
I think it's been at least 2, if not 3 now, because I remember going in like 2019. And then pandemic, and then bam, like event costs from SPPD, right?
Right. Yeah. So the reasoning behind that, I think, this is what I read, was there was that parade massacre. A man had driven his vehicle and killed a bunch of people at a parade in Wisconsin, I think. And so a policy was changed at the city of St. Paul requiring more police presence. And so the cost of the police presence caused them to cancel the event.
It's also things like SPPD was making an argument like, we need concrete barriers to prevent people from driving into people, and the event organizers need to pay the cost of that, right? Things like where the police department was like deciding what they thought was the standard for like a safety protocol for that event, and then being like, so now you come up with the funds for this. And like that process is what we need to fix, right? Like I think we should have like a smart safety plan for all events. The police may or may not be a part of that for I think most events that have like people outside with lots of activation and community vendors and things are like inherently safe. They are. You can come up with a smart security plan in partnership with the community that may or may not involve police for like pretty much most events we have. Police could play a role like directing traffic. That makes sense to me, right? Like they're doing that in a number of places. But we have to like change the decision-making process that's like the police are just determining what could happen. Because I think, another way to get around concrete barriers is like, what if we actually thoughtfully work with public works on like smart street closures that redirect people so that there isn't even an opportunity to try to like drive your car through something, right? You could also come up with like, someone could do this. It's like, yeah, they could. That's true. We live in a wild world, but like, are we going to approach that world with just like worst case scenario paranoia and not do things that make the world a fundamentally safer place, like community festivals? Or are we going to like just exercise some reason? So there's a whole effort now to try to address that. I love Little Mekong Festival. It's one of our best events. It's the night market also they've done the night market in conjunction with like a mural festival in my ward and other things too. It's like there's iterations of it that have happened. And we got to support our, local AAPI vendors and everyone who's part of that.
I think it's a real shame if we can no longer be outside and do events. More important than ever that we should be able to gather with each other in person in the outdoors. And like, I don't know, people are getting guns into the Mall of America, very heavily policed mall. I feel like guns and cars just have more awareness than ever of the ways people can use guns and cars to destroy lives.
Guns and cars destroying lives. It's funny you said, like, I think a lot of my time at the city so far is like the things I'm fighting are like cars, cops, and landlords. It's like in a battle about parking.
Is that your version of God, guns, and gays?
I don't know. Actually, I should know that reference, and I don't. I've heard that phrase, but like, what is that from again?
It's like a conservative mantra. Like, it's what conservatives campaign on: God, guns, and gays.
That's amazing. Yeah, I guess it's probably that, but it's it's like dealing with public safety issues, or frankly, like the fallout from police department abuse or just problems in general. It's renters and like it's how property owners in our community are not like doing the job they're supposed to be doing. It's like everyone fighting for where to put their car.
Has the way you relate to social media as a regular person or an elected official, like, has it changed? Because I don't know if it's ruined my attention span. There's a lot of things that maybe ruin my attention span. I don't consume a lot of social media. I produce a lot of it occasionally. But I wonder about the ways that it has affected the way my brain works.
So I could say so much about this. One of my cats went missing like 2 years ago, and I remember intentionally choosing, I was like, I'm going to download Nextdoor for sake of finding my cat. Like, it just was like, it was like the only reason I would ever get on Nextdoor, because other than that, I feel like Nextdoor is just such a wild platform. It's like, there's someone up the block at the corner store. It's like the unofficial tagline of Nextdoor is like, we live in a society, right? It's like people will just be writing about the most like not thing as if it's bad, and it's like a place where there's just like so much festering like racism and like just problematic comments. But I posted on there and was like, hi, I live in the neighborhood. My cat Oscar went missing 12 hours ago. I'm starting to get worried. If you see him, this is what he looks like.
Did you get scolded for letting your cat live outside?
No, I did not, thankfully. Don't even get me started on cat leash ordinance. That's like a whole niche topic here.
Okay.
But Yeah, you know, Oscar likes to go exploring, and he just, I don't know what happened. The screen door was open for 1 second too long. He just like ran off. So, you know, what I've realized is like I have to be really mindful of my social media intake. I think that our brains are not supposed to absorb this much overwhelming information at such a high volume. They're not. And so the whole time that you're having that happen to you, if you're like scrolling Twitter or scrolling Facebook or whatever, your body is like firing chemicals out. Like that's how your brain works, right? Your brain is like designed to keep you alive as because we're just all kind of like enlightened animals. So your brain is like, have some cortisol, have some adrenaline, have some more. Oh my God. Like it's like, and then you'll see a dog and it's like, have some serotonin. But like, that's bad for you. So there's a physical dimension to like how we're experiencing the internet. And I think I really got serious about that over the last 4 years being like a public official. And, you know, I have to create some boundaries because it will like physically wear you down. And then you can't actually show up well to conversations and problem solving thinking you have to be doing. I don't share my every waking thought on the internet anymore. And I feel like I open the internet up and everyone is doing that and I'm like not. And I think getting used to my new role, which is, it's actually not my job to just like constantly be opining on things. It's my job to like approach large scale problems thoughtfully and then communicate thoughtfully. And that means sometimes like not saying anything. In fact, most of the time it means like listening and not talking. And actually like when I see like politicians, I don't know, that phrase sounds so like negative, but just anyone who's like supposed to be a political leader and they're just like saying a lot, I'm like, okay, but how much problem solving are you doing? Like it starts to make me feel a little bit weird because there's just like too much there's a lot of like speculating and it's like your job is actually to be in the system now and use it to help people. So like, I don't want to hear all that. So I think that's been a shift. I was sort of, I anticipated it, but I feel like I live a different internet life now. I guess that's the best way I could put it because I have to. And I really want, like, there will be a day after politics for me where like, I just get absolutely buck wild and I will announce my retirement from being a role model. And it's just not anytime soon. And I'm sorry, but.
So let's talk about rent control in Minneapolis. You have gone through a very long rent control debate in St. Paul, enacted a policy, had that policy revised. And one of the things you hear about the St. Paul policy is it stifled new construction. It started without an exemption for new construction. I am concerned without an exemption that that is what happens. It stifles new construction, which I think is kind of essential piece of making your housing system work. If that goes away, that would be a very bad thing. So I know. So go. I don't know if that's a question yet, but go.
Here's my thing about what happened in St. Paul. I think that we should have let the policy take effect. It didn't even take effect until May. We should have evaluated what was and wasn't working. We should have accumulated a lot of market data and indicators across how people are experiencing the housing system. And then we should have had like a community informed like review and adjustment process. What happened instead was we had a stakeholder work group that was very volatile, very difficult and challenging and fraught. Had one type of stakeholder had disproportionate access to like all the elected officials, decision makers, policymakers, the narrative, the media, etc. The council completely disregarded the recommendations of the working group even then. Like the recommendation was a 15-year new construction exemption, retroactive and going forward. And they passed a 20-year one. And then the main, most vocal developer who was like championing that wanted 30 years and like continued to, make an issue out of it after the fact. It's like, I think that the problem to me is we can't have this conversation like developers are the only stakeholders in it. I don't like how that went down. We should not take rent stabilization away from people without being able to say, here are the protections you are going to get. In the city of St. Paul, we had a tenant protections policy. We had an advanced notice of sale policy that would like help mitigate buildings being like bought and upscaled and flipped, you know, that has been repealed. Against my vote, by the way. We used to have like tenant screening criteria to like help people avoid discrimination. That got repealed. We had all these different like anti-displacement policies that could have theoretically been really strong and good for renters in new construction. None of that was in place. So I just feel like we didn't even get to have that thoughtful policy conversation because enough people agreed, like, we just want to exempt it. And then that's like what happened. And now you still have people who are insisting, like, I'm not going to build in St. Paul. And it's like, so what is your policy position then? So it's just, I think that like the way the conversation has happened falls short of what I expect for my community. I would like to see a much better, you know, comprehensive policy review of the policy in the time that it's been in effect. I think it deserves an honest analysis. I think we had data sets coming out of our own city department that showed actually like the state of new construction is not as dire as other, you know, people are making it. And here's how that comes together, right? Like we saw some impact and there was like a story unfolding and we needed to give that the time and space to figure it out. So as someone who like understands those concerns and knows there's realities in like building housing, I have built more housing. Like my ward that I represent has actually built more housing than pretty much every other ward in St. Paul, except for maybe Lower Town and the forthcoming Highland Bridge, but they're like slowly building that out. I think that we just really, I don't like how we had that conversation. I don't like how it went down at the council. And they also used that process to pass a slew of other changes to the policy that are worse for renters. And we're going to have to come back to that another round. I guess that's where I'm at with it. Like, this is the first chapter, and now we're going to have an election, and a new group of leaders is going to be responsible for this policy. And I think that my experience with it will actually be very necessary as we try to figure out how to make it work for everyone.
I'm sorry for saving all my thorny and intractable housing questions for the end.
It's fine.
It's a real downer.
It's not.
if you stuck with the podcast to the end, you get thorny and intractable housing issues. A homeless encampment response is I think in the media coverage, real dichotomy in how Minneapolis handles it and how St. Paul handles it. And I wonder, is that real? Because it's a mess in Minneapolis. You know, the police are involved, people's possessions are being destroyed. And does St. Paul do it better? Is that real?
You know, I personally believe St. Paul is doing it better. I would never say our city is getting everything right or is perfect. And I would put our record of work up as a model against most other comparable city in the state. And I think that's because we are actually providing resources to people who are currently outside, whether that's permanent shelter or help storing their belongings or like permanent housing or storage or like better temporary shelter options that actually like meet them where they're at, or, you know, sudden actual accountable casework support or other. Like there's just a higher level of work that's more detailed, more people centered, more problem solved. I really worry that in Minneapolis, the approach is to just like move the problem around and get it out of sight without ever actually solving it. And I don't think that's, you know, I know there are like council leaders and so many community folks who want that to be different and are like fighting every day for that to be different. I desperately do not want anyone anywhere to have to experience that. And I think I've tried very hard in St. Paul to push our approach to be coming from the very top, right? Like our mayor and deputy mayor have built out like a team that is coordinated with Ramsey County and with a network of service providers. And, you know, there's just a more intensive problem solving response and approach that is more humane. We have staff who know people outside by name and know kind of their route. Like if you're living outside, you know where you can get hot breakfast, then you know where you can spend like these parts of your day, and then you know where you can sleep at night that's safe. And like having that person to person level of knowledge of who's outside and needs to get indoors and needs permanent homes is important. So yes, I think it is going better in St. Paul, and I think it also isn't good enough because there's always more work to do. You know, there's more work to do, but that has come from like marshaling city resources and new investment to help make that happen. We opened an old dorm in my ward with Ramsey County funding to like be an LGBTQ couple shelter. Like Luther Seminary is this site that has like a dormitory called Stube Hall, and there was nothing going on there. And we work with the county to get it open to be like queer couples who are homeless can now stay here and be in like a safe, dry place with staff that has like your own room, right? Like privacy, dignified shelter options, not just, you know, there's a lot of shelter options are still just like cots out in the open, things like that. I visited a warming space. Okay, so you know how Christmas Eve was like deadly negative temperatures, like the night before Christmas Eve? And in my ward in Newell Park, which is like a city facility, we opened up a warming space where you go in there and it's like there's just a place you can be inside overnight without literally dying. And those type of spaces getting activated with like city county coordination, they save lives. And, you know, step 1 is save lives, step 2, get people housed, but it's possible. There isn't an excuse for it to not be happening. There just isn't. So there's more to do, but that's the bar.
The thing I think about is like Minneapolis City Hall, it's not like they don't know these things, I think. And I think everyone has the best of intentions. Maybe that's my problem. I assume everyone has the best of intentions. I think people want to solve the problem genuinely. And then I think, well, is it a lack of resources? Are we just struggling against a lack of resources? Is the problem bigger in Minneapolis?
I don't know the answer to that. I think that like coordinated, centralized political will is a missing factor. I think that there's also different layers, right? You all have park board, you have county, and then you have city, and then within city now there's like this who's on for like there's that. And so like in St. Paul, we control all of our parks facilities, and so we can actually like leverage that system to help people. And then we work with the county, and then we have like the community groups and shelters helping. And that's coming from the top. It's coming from the mayor in coordination with the city, and then the literal county manager. Ryan O'Connor is the manager of Ramsey County, and he's like in meetings where there's real-time data being shared about here's how many people are outside. In the last 2 hours, we helped these 4 people get housing. There's like another 6 people out here, and we're going to go check on them again. Like that's how coordinated it has been. And then it has been, now there's like secondary and third level supervisory staff who can like take on that role and be the around the clock person. But it started out with like literal leadership in the room talking about that kind of stuff. I don't know that that's going on in Minneapolis. Like, and maybe it is, and I don't want to be speaking negatively of work that is happening that I don't know, but it has to come from the top.
Let's finish the episode by saying nice things about Minneapolis. So thinking about like maybe in the realm of housing and transportation, but maybe not. Like, are we influential? Are we influencing you? I think I mispronounced influence. Are we influencing St. Paul in any way? You done some zoning things?
You're influencing me. So like, let's take the last few weeks, right? So we had 15 inches of snow get dumped on our streets, and that revived the like municipal snow shoveling and streets plowing and, you know, all the like snow removal conversation. And I'm following that with curiosity as someone who wants to see sidewalks be clearer, wants to come up with a, you know, sustainable solution, wants to see better enforcement of the status quo right now, like businesses notoriously not clearing their sidewalks, all these different pieces, right, of what's not working. I think that in St. Paul, we can take on things right now, like we could clear the corners, like the quadrants, I think is what it's called. So the kind of accessibility ramps onto like the streets at the 4 corners. There's a potential to have like a subset of the streets get their alleys, getting spicy. Their sidewalks get some kind of city clearing. Like, I think we should look at what the scenarios could be. And so I'm interested in that. I'm really interested in that. What else? You all have open streets, right? So
we do.
You know, I've heard over the years, like, why don't we have an open streets?
Yeah.
And so now I'm trying to figure out how we can have an open streets. So that's like a 2023 project for me. It's just, why do you guys get to have open streets? We should get to have open streets.
More street festivals. That's what gets me to go to a place. If you had street festivals, I would come to St. Paul because I'm very averse to traveling long distances away from the Wedge.
Yeah, I know. It's like a really long haul for you, and
Especially
you
on
got
the
to check in with your
21.
people once you make it. Let them know you made it.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are some ways that that you all are influencing me, and I appreciate all the different there's a whole ecosystem of people, right, that are all fighting for that. It's organizers, it's grassroots folks, it's advocates, policy nerds, staff, electeds, candidates. Like, thank you.
Oh, I forgot. We have to. Do you have recommendations to give us so that I can make this episode as long as possible? What are you enjoying?
You mean like in life?
Yeah, like if you have a hobby or a place you like to go, you could do a local thing, or you could like a piece of entertainment that you enjoy.
Yeah. What am I even doing?
What makes you happy?
So, favorite new restaurant in St. Paul, Calzada Filipino Restaurant. Please come out to. It's the old Augustine's laundromat building. It's at Selby, and I don't want to say the cross street. I'll get it wrong. It's on Selby Avenue, and it's really good. And they have just new different dishes all the time, and then regular things. They have amazing drinks. Podcast I've been listening to, I think it's called the BBC Global News Podcast, because it is where I can learn about what's going on with Ukraine and also what's going on with Iran. Like, those are the two international situations I have been learning the most, tracking that, like, and I, especially for Iran news, like, I think I have appreciated like BBC Persian just breaking down like, here's what's happening, here's what's so harmful about that, all these things. So that podcast has been a digestible way for me to experience world news as someone who, like, I'm consumed with local government. Like, we spent all episode talking about that, but I have, my mom is a Korean adoptee. My dad is an immigrant from Tehran. Like, there's a lot of things that impact me going on around the world and that matter to my family. And I often feel like, where do I even get the time to understand that? And so it's a way to like learn something, because they'll also just tell you other things going on. Like, this Bolsonarista is taking over their freaking, what's that crazy thing that happened? They had their own January 6th, right?
Yeah.
So you'll hear about something like going on around the world, and they'll just like break it down for you. So as someone who like doesn't think of myself as like a foreign policy expert, but follows foreign affairs with a lot of interest, I really like that podcast. What am I watching right now? You know what? This is like so dumb.
I have had a hard time getting into TV. That's one of the things that made me think my attention span was shot, because I couldn't like watch a bunch of TV shows in a row anymore. And I wonder if it's like the phone thing, like you have to be on your phone, and so you can't focus on the really important screen, which is the TV.
I think it's also anxiety. Like, maybe you don't have anxiety. I
do.
I struggle to participate in escapism increasingly because my anxiety just like won't let me. But if you want to escape and have anxiety, you should watch The Last of Us on HBO. And it is so far an extremely good adaptation of the video game. PlayStation people know all about TLOU, but you should, I think it's set up so that anyone who hasn't played the games can just like on-ramp into it. And it stars Pedro Pascal, who has really carved out like a lane for himself as, a childless person in real life who is like mega dad in everything that he does. He's like Baby Yoda's dad, and now he's Ellie's dad. And I think he was like another dad I forgot about somewhere.
And shout out to childless losers everywhere. We see you, and you are important to us.
We are your representation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So those are some things that I think would bring you some joy, or you'd learn something.
Thank you for spending. This is a very extremely long podcast. We took up so much of your time. You're a very important person, and you gave us so much time.
I'm like a medium important person. I appreciate you. I was happy to spend this time. Thank you for your dedication and your coverage. Thank you for your attention and diligence in just trying to understand local government and make it accessible and frankly just fun for people. I appreciate your fair and tough questions, and also your softball questions. Those are always a good time. And I am here. So thank you to everyone who followed along. If you need me, I'm at mitrajalali.com, and appreciate what you're doing for our community. Everyone out there that's listening.
This has been the Wedge Live podcast. My guest has been Mitra Jalali, who's running for city council in St. Paul, running for re-election. Go check out that awesome website. I'm your host, John Edwards. Thank you for listening.
Bye.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.